Hello everyone and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. Thank you all for your comments. I really appreciate all of them. If you have any more questions, comments, or concerns concerning this next segment as we were looking at my personal positional rankings at the tight end position, please consider leaving them as well. I also appreciate all the trade analyses that you are looking for guidance on. So continue with that as well. I really love it and really appreciate it. And good luck to you all in your fantasy football exploits for Week 3. But without further ado, let's jump into our fourth segment of the day. Let's look at my personal fantasy tight end rankings. As Andre said, what a weird start it's been for tight ends. And I have to agree. Bowers, tight end 1, just crazy. I do have a concern with tight ends. I have Laporta, says Hunter 18. All fantastic points. And I agree with all of them. Tight ends, like I said before the season, are always going to be weird. Because you now have, like I said, this youthful movement of tight ends coming into the league. Your Laportas, your Kincaids, your McBrides. And then you have the old guard in Kelce, Kittle, and Andrews, who you're still holding out hope can still perform for you, but also have underperformed to some extent in these past 2 games. So this list is highly indicative of how this change in the mindset of how we view the tight end market has affected how I and you guys also view how to draft tight ends. So let's start off with guys who I think can perform this week, but it's really a crapshoot at this point because I don't know which tight end is going to be tight end what week in, week out. But let's start off with Brock Bowers, who Andre mentioned. Actually, wrong graphic. Brock Bowers finally had a breakout game like everyone was expecting with 18.8 fantasy points in that game against Baltimore on 9 catches on 9 targets, 98 yards. And the thing about Brock Bowers, right, is that a lot of people expecting him coming out of Georgia being very impressive there was that he was immediately going to be one of the best offensive weapons for Las Vegas. But it hasn't been the case because this Las Vegas Raiders team really has been kind of weird in how they set up offensively. I don't necessarily know what Antonio Pierce's game plan is, but it involves some sort of letting Gardner Minshew have some modicum of control over it, but also relying on Alexander Mattison and Zamir White to try and find chunk plays, but preferring Alexander Mattison. It's just a very weird offensive setup. So I don't really know Brock Bowers' role week in, week out in this offense. But if they give him the ball, he can have big games. And he was one of the reasons why I feel like Las Vegas was able to get back into that game against Baltimore and ultimately win it. So in terms of Brock Bowers going forward and potentially being the tight end 1, it's not a crazy proposition to think about because Laporta, remember him, last year's rookie season, tight end 1 for the entire season, only had 900 or something yards. So it's not like it's far-fetched to think that Brock Bowers could, but doesn't know he's in an offense that really has no sense of direction in how he's going to fit into it. So take him week by week. If you are an owner of him, hold out hope that somehow, some way, the Vegas Raiders will get him the football because he is one of the most talented players on offense. The next up, I have David Njoku, another guy who's kind of been disappointing, but it's not ultimately his fault as when you have Deshaun Watson at quarterback at this point in his career, he's not the best person to throw you the football. So, David Njoku, though, he's playing against the Giants, has had a couple injury concerns this season, but I think he will play against New York. Let's hope he can play because he did not play against Jacksonville. But I've been saying this. If Kevin Stefanski wants this Deshaun Watson experience to have any sort of success to it, you need to involve David Njoku. David Njoku is a valuable asset, whether it be in the play-action passing game or just as one of your better receivers overall. Because look at this receiving room. I don't like Amari Cooper right now. He's aging, and I don't think Deshaun Watson trusts him as a wide receiver 1. And Jerry Jeudy, yes, he's shown flashes of being potentially a nice receiver to have, but he's never really put it all together to the point where I trust him for an entire 17-game season. So the answer that's left is David Njoku at this point. So hopefully David Njoku is healthful enough to contribute what he can to the Browns offense, but it's ultimately up to Kevin Stefanski, Deshaun Watson, and the OC to find a way to make it happen to get Njoku more involved, because he was the reason, let's be honest, that Joe Flacco had a lot of success in that offense and ultimately led them to the playoffs, because David Njoku was just so reliable over that period of time. And now just seeing him not take control of this offense is kind of appalling to me, because he is thus valuable, and who knows when Chubb will be back and what he'll look like. So you have to have some contingency plan for your offense. Look for David Njoku, potentially, if he plays, to have a big bounce-back game for you in fantasy. But then, looking at Dallas Goedert, this is a guy who is kind of in that Jake Ferguson, TJ Hawkinson when he's healthy vein, who's a guy who has that one trait that a lot of people like and hone in on when they're looking for a good fantasy tight end. But it's also a question of how this offense plays out. And what we've seen from the Eagles is that Hurts and Barkley are trying to make magic happen. And even though I was really impressed with the way Hurts distributed the ball to his secondary weapons outside of guys named Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert really has been falling by the wayside in this offense. But against New Orleans, I do feel like the Eagles can be playing catch-up in this game, because the Saints' offense has looked like one of the NFL's best. So it could be a classic OK Corral shootout where you're going to have to throw the football to more targets and get them more touches and get them more involved in this offense. And so Dallas Goedert's production could project to go up. And I know it's wishful thinking, but I think that Dallas Goedert can be an interesting weapon to have. He's a very good short yardage situational tight end. He's not, going to get you yak, but he is going to get you valuable yardage and maybe a touchdown or two. And so I hope that the Eagles' offense can find a way to incorporate him into this team, because he could be a valuable asset for them and for you in fantasy in terms of those implications. So just those three guys really could stand out. But just going off the list, all of these guys are very similar that I talked about. Jake Ferguson going up against the Ravens. And I'm really shocked that Jake Ferguson does not have a higher usage rate or target share this season. Because last season, I feel like the reason why the Cowboys' regular season success was so impressive was because Dak had, as Shep Easy Sweet Spot said, Hawkins head and shoulders above Goedert. Well, get him healthy then. If Hawkinson isn't on the field, I can't necessarily, award him for his exploits. So I love Hawkinson as much as the next guy. I think in that tier of players, Hawkinson is the clear kind of guy who you feel can ascend to high-end tight end 2 status for your fantasy team. But right now, he's just not healthy. And I want to see what he does with Sam Darnold, whether or not he fits back into this offense immediately. So for now, we're going to have to look at guys like Goedert and Jake Ferguson, even though I'm not as confident as I was in them last year, right? Where both of these offenses' successes in the regular season really were contingent on finding different weapons outside of their number one guys. So Jake Ferguson and Dallas Goedert, that's just the way it is, because everyone knows who the top tight ends are. Everyone knows who they want to have their team. They want Laportas, they want Kelce's, they want Kittles, they want Kincaids, they want Andrews. They, after that, really are kind of in a situation where you have to take things as they come, because the tight end position is not easy after the fact, after all these superstars go. So as much as Hawkinson's return to the NFL could really help bolster this kind of tier of players, this is the situation we're in. This is kind of where I view the tight end market, to the point where I kind of feel weird saying that Dallas Goedert and Jake Ferguson are going to have big performances and get right performances, because I really have no faith in them from what I've seen through 2 games from both of their offenses, especially with the Eagles one. So, at the end of the day, the bottom line is, once you know a guy like Hawkinson gets healthy, and once you know we kind of figure more about these youthful players like Kincaid and Bride, then we'll have a better understanding of the tight end market. But until then, these 3 guys who I mentioned, all at different points. Dalton Kincaid and Brock Bowers are in that youth, with Dallas Goedert is kind of in that 3rd, 4th tier. So, make of this list what you will. It's not gospel, it's just my humble opinion. Also, it's based off of matchups, so let me know what you think in the comments. But, to close out today's show, we are going to be looking at the wide receiver cornerback matchups will define week 3 in terms of fantasy, maybe win you a couple of games. You don't want to miss the final segment of the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast right after this short break.